It's time to talk about the important issues for the natural state. And there's only one place to turn for that. Opportunity Arkansas's Nick Horton. You can find Nick's work at opportunityarkansas.org.
And welcome back to the Wednesday edition of First News, 39 minutes after 7 o'clock. And yes, Opportunity Arkansas has released the 2025 scorecard for the last legislative session. And here to go over it with us this morning is Nick Horton, the CEO and founder of Opportunity Arkansas. Nick, welcome back to the show. How you doing this morning?
Hey, welcome back to you. We missed you last week.
Yeah, well, I have a little bone to
or
pick.
Someone did, I presume.
Right,
Yeah.
Someone somewhere. But you waited until I was out of town last week to release the 2025 scorecard for the last legislative session. So now, before we get into what's in the scorecard, can you start by explaining what the scorecard is that Opportunity Arkansas puts out and how you rank the different lawmakers to come up with a score for each of them? How does all this work? How does it all come together?
Yeah, great question, and I'm excited to talk about this because I'm really excited and proud of how this product turned out. I hope it's going to be, I'm confident it's going to be a great resource.
Yeah, it's impressive.
For people of Arkansas to know how they're, thank you, and all the credit for that goes to our team. I actually had very little to do with it this year, but I'm really proud of them and the way it turned out. Mm-hmm. Let me say a couple things about what the scorecard is not.
Okay.
Because I think there is some confusion about that, and then I'll just talk a little bit about what it is. So this is not, I think because our organization is still relatively new, and the type of work that we do is relatively new. A lot of people in Arkansas tend to just focus on the political side of things, like who's elected, who's getting elected, who's running for office. This is not that, and I think it would be really easy to view this and see, oh, these are endorsements, like these are Opportunity Arkansas's selected favorite legislators. Right. That's not what this is. What this is truly, in its purest sense, is, I mean, the secret is really in the name. It's a scorecard. It's a tabulation of, here's all the bills that we think were the most important. There were 1,652 bills. 1,600, let's say it again, 1,652 bills in a 95-day legislative session. There were about 140 of those, I think 139 is the precise number, that we felt like were really important, that fell within our areas of focus of welfare reform and reducing taxes and making Arkansas more competitive and fixing our broken foster care system, our 6 what we call pathways to opportunity. So there were 139 of those. And then what we did after the session is we sat down as a team and said, okay, some of those never got run in committee, some of them never made it out of committee, some of them maybe just didn't rise to the level of being on the official scorecard, but there were 22 that we felt like, well, these are really significant. These either took us forward towards more opportunity for the next generation of Arkansans, which is a big part of our mission at Opportunity Arkansas, or these took us backwards. And so we took those 22 bills, multiply that by 135 legislators, you get somewhere close to 3,000 individual votes. Now, some votes didn't make it to the Senate, some votes didn't make it to the House. So it's not exactly, it's about 2,500, though, individual votes that we scored for every single legislator in the Arkansas General Assembly. And then each of those 22 bills got a weight. So not every bill is equal. Some bills increase taxes, some bills reduce spending, some bills significantly expanded welfare, some didn't expand welfare as much. So we, on a sliding scale of 1 to 3, we assigned them a weight based on primarily impact of how much they were going to affect the next generation and affect taxpayers. And then we tallied all that up and added it up and said, okay, you know, Senator Jim Bob from Fort Smith or wherever, this is the percentage score that you got based on our policy priorities and the way that we think folks should have voted.
Yeah. Well, one thing out of what you just said, I'm really glad that this is not a best of contest where whoever buys an ad in the publication ends up being one of the winners. And so this is an actual scorecard of how things went. I also did have one small bone of contention to pick, which was that I printed this out yesterday at our here at the studios, Nick, and I had to go get new toner for the printer because this is a thick piece of work here. So the boss,
pretty comprehensive.
It's very comprehensive.
With most of our products, we tried to make it really digestible, and we use a lot of graphics and colors, and it's very it's very user friendly, I hope. The other thing I want to make sure people know is there is the tabulate, the comprehensive version with the tables and the graphics and the pictures and the explanations of the bills and all of that. But the other thing we've started doing, and really proud of this as well because it's very user friendly, is we have what we call our online version of our scorecard, where every single legislator, it's similar to the legislative website, where every legislator has a profile. And what's really cool now is we have two of these. We have 2023 session, you have 2025, and you've got different tabs where you can go in and you can see your legislator, how they voted in 2023, and how they voted this year. And then now we're also able, because we have multiple years of data, to give legislators lifetime scores. And so an average of their performance over any and all of the legislative sessions that they've been involved in. I've got some takeaways from all of this as well, but I want to be sure I mention the online version of the scorecard. If you don't know who your legislator is, we're working to incorporate a tool where you can search by your address, you can figure out who your legislator is, and then you can immediately look and see how they scored on the most important issues.
And, of course, all of that happens at opportunityarkansas.org is the website that you can go to and view the publication. So, Nick, does the scorecard crank out, I guess for lack of a better word, a winner? Is there a best, or maybe best is not the right word either, maybe it's most conservative senator or a most conservative representative in the House based on what they voted on this year? Does it dial it down to that small of a frame?
It does, and I'm glad you brought that up. Again, as you said, these are not endorsements, but we want to always be sure that we recognize folks who are doing really good work and living up to their commitments to taxpayers to say, we're going to do things differently. We're not going to just use Einstein's definition of insanity and keep doing the same thing over and over and over again like we've done for the last 150 years. Right. And we're going to try some different things to really solve some generational problems. So, again, not endorsements, but just recognition of hard work. We have 10 award winners this year, 10 out of 135 folks who scored 90% or above on the scorecard. Nice. And we're recognizing all of those. If folks click on the full PDF version of the scorecard, they'll see that in the Senate we had the highest scoring Republican was Senator Josh Bryant from Rogers in Northwest Arkansas. And then in the House, we actually had two legislators who were tied at 102%, one of which is from Central Arkansas, Representative David Ray from Maumelle, and then Representative Brit McKenzie from Rogers. And people might be wondering, how did they get over 100%? That's a fair question. I've gotten some questions about that. One of the things we did, we felt like was important to do this year, we tweaked our methodology a little bit, and we recognized folks who carried significant legislation by giving them an extra point in the scorecard. So if you carried a big tax cut, or if you carried a welfare reform bill, or if you really did some heavy lifting on a big issue, you got an extra point. And then conversely, if you carried a bad bill that we scored against, you were subtracted a point. So those guys voted pretty much universally the right way, but then also carried some really big legislation. And so congratulations and really thank you to those three guys who were our highest scores this year.
Yeah, no, and they get a nice spotlight in the scorecard. So, Nick, you and I have discussed plenty during the session and after the session that overall the thought was that this is somewhat of a disappointing session as far as some of the bills that got passed and some that didn't even get looked at. Talking about like income tax and things like that. But what are some of the highlights for you out of the scorecard? What did it show you about how people voted last session compared to how they voted in 2023? What were some of the big things that once the scorecard was compiled that you were like, wow, okay, that's what this is telling us?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It was really, frankly, and unfortunately, a confirmation of what a lot of us had been feeling and seeing throughout legislative session, a confirmation of what conservatives had been concerned about and raising concerns about for several weeks and months during session, which is that there just weren't any huge big ticket items, certainly not on the level of what we saw in 2023, where you had universal school choice, you had massive income tax cuts, you had some welfare reform, you had unemployment reform, you had universal licensing reciprocity, you had a rejection of a food stamps expansion. I mean, you had some really, really significant wins in 2023. And in hindsight, maybe you could make the argument like, well, we can't pass universal school choice every session, right? I mean, there's some things that just are at a level of their own. But in general, yes. I mean, I think the scorecard was a confirmation in a lot of ways that we just really took our foot off the gas. We sat down and compared this year's scorecard to last year's scorecard. In terms of award winners and folks who scored over 90%, it was a reduction of about half.
Wow.
I mean, we had over 20 award winners. Now, some of those were recognized for leadership and not necessarily their voting records.
Right.
But a lot of folks took really significant steps back. If you look at, for example, the average Senate Republican scores, the average House and Senate Democrat scores, you'll see really significant changes. And the daylight, what's frustrating and disappointing, frankly, is the daylight between the average Republican scores and the average Democrat scores is closing.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's not a trend. I hope that's just a one-off. But that was certainly the story this session. You look at, for example, the House Minority Leader, Andrew Collins from right there in Little Rock. He scored in the 40s. But you've got some Republican legislators, our lowest scoring House Republican, John Eubanks, who scored 17%.
What the heck?
So you've got the leader of the Democrats in the House scoring significantly higher than some of these House Republicans, most of whom are term limited and have been around for a while and have just kind of started mailing it in, frankly. But that's a huge change. And then when you look at the bills we scored, we had a lot more positive wins to score last session than this session. And I think the numbers somewhat flipped on that, where it was about 2/3 positive or so last session, and then it became about 2/3 bad policy changes this session. So there's clearly some shifting that's happened here. Again, I'm telling folks every day, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that this was just a blip on the radar and this doesn't become the trend.
Right.
But it is a real concern, and it's something I think folks just need to be mindful of.
It's a super informative publication, the 2025 scorecard from Opportunity Arkansas for the last legislative session. I do want to remind everybody that opportunityarkansas.org, that is the website to go to. I would recommend downloading it to your computer as opposed to printing it out like I did, because you might get, just make sure you got a lot of ink if you're gonna print it out.
Hey, you know what? I can do you one better, Toby.
Yeah.
If folks are a financial supporter of Opportunity Arkansas, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization.
That's right.
They'll get a copy in the mail.
There you go.
So you can get a printed, glossy, stapled, beautiful version of this if you're a supporter of Opportunity Arkansas.
And of course, you can do that at opportunityarkansas.org as well. So make sure to get signed up and support Opportunity Arkansas. But make sure you take a read on this. Nick, we're going to talk about this more as the weeks progress. We'll be referring to this as we talk about the politics here in the state moving forward. But sure appreciate all of you and everyone at Opportunity Arkansas's work on the scorecard this year. It's absolutely impressive the way that you've compiled all this into something that's completely digestible for a normal person to read. You don't have to be a specialist in politics to understand what's going on in the scorecard. So make sure to check that out at opportunityarkansas.org. Nick, always appreciate the time, and of course we'll catch up again at the same time next week.
Hey, looking forward to it. Thanks as always.